How's everybody doing? Good, good. We have two Charlottes. Can you hear me okay? I've got a new mic and I haven't. Okay, good. Thank you. Um, okay. While we're waiting, anybody want to share who you are or how you heard about me? Or if you don't want to, that's totally fine too.
I'll jump in. I'm one of the Charlottes. You came up on my Instagram. I think it said, you follow 10 people, you follow as well, and that kind of a deal. And I think I sort of saw a couple of posts and went, and took a follow. And then I saw today be advertised and went, go on then, I'll jump on that and have a look.
Oh,
So yeah, it was
wonderful.
just one of those networking things that I follow a lot of PhD content creators. So
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being here. It's you send all this stuff out into the ether and you never really know who's seeing it or like my mom likes my posts all the time, but anybody else want to share who you are and where you're from?
I'll jump in. My name is Kimberly Daly. I'm in Virginia, about an hour outside of DC. Um, I think I found you maybe on LinkedIn rather than Instagram, but I know I've seen you on Instagram as well. I think the initial might have been on LinkedIn.
Great. I lived in DC for a year. I had a fellowship working in the Senate. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm based at a university in Virginia.
I suppose it's less fun these days, but it was fun back then, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I will
Anybody?
say it's less fun these days.
Yeah. Um, oh, somebody's just messaged me. I need the link. Um, Somebody else, tell me who you are and where you're from, and I'll talk for a little bit today just to kind of warm everybody up and tell you who I am and what I'm doing here. But then I would like to spend a good chunk of time, opening the floor for your questions and hearing your thoughts and your hopes and your concerns and all of that. So, does anybody else want to share?
I'm Rudy Leon, and I am based in Champaign, Illinois.
Oh, Rudy, I know you. How are you?
I'm well. I am off camera today, though.
That's fine. How
I
are
hope
your
I'm off camera.
cats? Rudy's an editor. Well, I'd be curious to hear your perspective on some of the stuff I'll chat about. But
Okay. It sounded like it wasn't just for people thinking about becoming editors. And it caught my attention, so I decided to attend.
oh, cool.
Um,
I'm
yes. And
glad
my
you're
cat
here.
is Velcro and fine, but it's hard to work with a cat glued. He's becoming very needy. So
Oh,
he needs
Rudy
another cat.
Rudy's a very talented editor and indexer. So if anyone ever needs an editor or an indexer, I can highly recommend her as well.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
Anybody else want to say hello? It's fine if you don't. I understand this is a little.
I can jump in. I'm Jen Greenfield and dialing in from Denver, Colorado. And I need to be off camera for just a little bit and then I will hop on for the discussion.
No problem. No problem at all. We're very informal around here. I'll just assume you're laughing at my jokes, even if I can't see you. Um, all right. Well, I will go ahead and start. Um, Let me pull up my screen. Like I said, I usually when I do these, oh, hi, Tula. Thank you for sharing. You're in Michigan. No problem. Um, so when I do these, I usually go through this whole like three steps to become an academic editor, and it's the framework that I teach in my program, Becoming an Academic Editor. And I'm honestly kind of bored talking about the same thing all the time, so I figured I would talk about something different today. And something that I've been thinking a lot about is this transition from academia to editing or academia to business, right? This um, thought of or this process that we go through. I think I shared the wrong. Well, that's good enough. You can see the slideshow there. Okay, great. And let me pull up the chat. I will tell you I'm terrible at trying to juggle the chat and everything at the same time. So please feel free to enter questions or anything that you want. And I'll scroll through it after. I just can't multitask like that. Um, so yeah. So anyway, I'm Paulina, by the way. My company is Acadia Editing Services. I'm not giving the usual spiel and sales pitch and all that of 3 steps to become an editor, and this is my framework today. If you do want to hear that, I do think it's a helpful presentation. I'm happy, just, reply to one of my emails and I will gladly send you a link to a recording from a past one. Um, but I've been thinking about a lot lately about this transition from academia to entrepreneurship. And, I know there's almost 70 people who have enrolled in my program in the last year. And I just keep seeing this common thread among pretty much all of them. And it's this fear of letting go of our identity as academics and professor, or, this thing that we thought we were always going to be for the rest of our lives. And it's scary to let that go and to then develop this new identity of being an editor, or a business owner or whatever. And so I'm kind of just sharing my thoughts on that for a little bit today. And I'd love to hear what you think and how you feel about it. And then if you have any questions about becoming an editor, starting a business, or leaving academia or whatever, I'm happy to, have that conversation, and answer any questions that you have. So I'll briefly share my story. If you haven't heard it yet, it's also the first episode of my podcast. And I will share one slide about my program just so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. But really, this is intended to be a conversation about this whole process. So I'm a former U.S. politics professor. That was as fun as you can imagine it was. I grew up in Florida and I had 2 tenure track jobs before I left academia in 2019. I did all the things that I was supposed to do when I was a professor. I poured myself into teaching. I published, I served, I did all the things. And as a result, I was completely burnt out and miserable. And so I thought for several years about whether or not I should leave, and is it okay to leave, and what if I just try going somewhere else? Maybe it'll get better. And I did change schools. It got a little bit better. It was a bit more supportive of faculty at the second school, but all of the same problems were still there. The plagiarism, the cheating, the faculty meetings, the committee, all the burnout, all of it. And that was before COVID and AI. So I feel for you who are still dealing with all of that now. We were also living in a place that we didn't like. We were far from our family, and we were just tired of sacrificing family time and the, geographic choice of being able to decide where we wanted to live just for me to have this job that I was miserable in anyway. And around the same time, my mother-in-law was diagnosed with lung cancer. We had our first child, and we had no support. We were just so alone. And I knew that, we wanted to move to Maine, where we live now, where my husband grew up, and I knew I didn't want to be a professor anymore. But, it really culminated in the summer of 2019 when I broke. I was, my son was a year old. I had a lot of postpartum hormones going on. And it was rough. It was a really tough year. And the summer of 2019, I seriously reached a breaking point. And I remember I had this constant anxiety and this stomach churning, and I felt so guilty about leaving and telling my department chair I was leaving. And it was just this perfect storm between me wanting to make myself and my family happy, but also not wanting to let everybody else down, which looking back, that was silly. I shouldn't have cared what they thought. But anyway, that's the position that we are in. You know, if you're here, you're probably the kind of person who cares what other people think, and you're trying to do the best you can. And so I was terrified to leave academia, but I did it. And we sold our house, we moved to Maine, and I had no idea what I was going to do. But thankfully, you know, I had just published my book. I had worked with the freelance copy editor for Routledge, where we published. And I thought, you know, I had no idea that copy editors existed. But when I worked with her, I thought, hey, I could do this. This will be fine, you know. And for about 6 months, I spent hours online looking through job ads, Googling remote work editor, which is a useless task. Don't do that. All this stuff comes up that is not helpful. And, you know, I eventually figured it out. I eventually got jobs as a freelancer with some editing agencies and some academic presses. But it took me probably 2 or 3 years in between having another child and a toddler at home to get up the courage to start putting myself out there to attract private clients. Like I knew that that was the way to be successful in this business, to make more money. But I always thought, who's going to hire me? How am I going to connect with these people and convince them to hire me? And but eventually I tried because I knew that that was the only way that I was going to make more money. And, you know, I figured it out. In the end of 2022 is when I was starting to attract clients, and I had just 6 private clients that year. Last year in 2024, I had 55 clients, and I hit 6 figures. There's combined 70,000 with editing and 30,000 with coaching. And this year I've had over 20 clients, but I'm not even marketing myself. And I actually put on my website that I'm not taking new clients because I'm shifting focus to my program, Becoming an Academic Editor. So all of that is to say that you're not alone if you're unhappy in academia. There are so many people who are. And you don't have to stay if you don't want to. And I really want to explore today this idea of what else is out there, because I feel like when we're in academia, we are pigeonholed and we're told that, oh, you'll never do anything else. Like, what are you going to do? Work in fast food? Or like, you're not qualified to do anything else. And, you know, we're sold this idea that we are not capable. And we are. We absolutely are. And so I will say that you know, in these photos, you can see I'm very happily on vacation every year. I do not work on vacation. I do not take my laptop. It is not time to catch up. It is time to actually have work-life balance, which I think is, you know, the thing that I like best about having my own business. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to talk more about it later if you want. But let me get into this question of what is the difference between academia and entrepreneurship? So many of us went into academia because we wanted job security. I was raised by a single mom. She made $15,000 a year washing boats in Florida. For me, education was my safety net and it was my way out. And I knew that I had to do well in school and go to college and get a job that was secure, because if not, then I would be poor for the rest of my life. And, you know, I thought that academia was the most secure option. You know, you have a salary and you have a PhD and everybody's going to want to hire you and you have benefits. And right, this was safety to me. And the idea of becoming an entrepreneur was just totally out of the question. I did not think highly of business owners. I did not think highly of capitalism. And I think deep down, I thought that I wasn't capable of having a business, of taking on that kind of risk. And I remember having a conversation with my undergrad advisor at the time, and he said he was an assistant professor and made around $50,000 a year for his salary. This was like 20 years ago now. And I think a lot of faculty are still making that. But anyway, that sounded really good to me at the time because it was a lot more than what my mom made. And so again, academia represented job security and safety. But then when I got into it, I realized there are no raises, there are no COLAs. You're teaching 5 classes a semester. You're using summer not to rest, but to catch up on all the research and writing you never got to during the year. And now, of course, tenure is basically meaningless, and higher ed is in chaos. And the thing that I've been playing with in my mind lately is that academia is actually a lot like what I thought owning a business was like, right? That you're working 24/7 and you're burned out and you're constantly unhappy. And what I've learned in owning my business is that it is in today's world and having an online business, being an editor or a coach, it's really nothing like what we traditionally think of as entrepreneurship. You think of like starting a restaurant or a retail store, and you need a brick and mortar lease, and you need insurance and licensing and all this other stuff, right? It's like a whole thing to start a business. But when you're running an online business as an editor or a coach, you don't need any of that. You can create an LLC if you want to. You don't have to. Though I always say I'm not a lawyer or an accountant. You should talk to them, for advice on that. But you don't have to have an LLC. You really just need a laptop and Microsoft Word and a homepage and a LinkedIn profile. And that will, though the things you use, the software and stuff you use will grow over time. But when you're starting out, you can start small. And the other thing is, as an academic, you are already trained to evaluate and assess research and writing. You do this all the time. You are doing the work of an editor, whether it's copy editing or developmental editing. You are doing it all the time in your faculty role. You are grading papers, you are co-authoring, you're a peer reviewer, all of this stuff. The difference is that your students probably don't pay that much attention to your feedback, and you have to deal with other colleagues who are often not very nice. But as an editor, our clients are appreciative and they're grateful and they're kind, and they, you get that kind of gratitude, and like you're getting something back. You're putting yourself into your work, but you're getting something back for it, not just monetarily, but emotionally, and in terms of just being fulfilled in your job. I will share an example or share a story from a member of my community becoming an academic editor. This person is still a professor, and she joined our March cohort. So we just wrapped up a few weeks ago. And in one of our last Zoom meetings, she said she was grading papers for the end of the spring semester. And she had this moment where she realized, I'm spending hours giving feedback on this writing that most of these students are not even going to read. And I could be making 5 cents a word, hundreds of dollars doing this instead in my business. And she's staying because her daughters are on, they have a tuition deal or whatever. So she has to stay until they graduate, which is fine. But she's starting now so that once, a few years down the road, her business is built, and, she can retire from teaching and go on and run her business. So anyway, the work is very similar in principle. But there is one big difference, I think, which I will get into in just a second. When you're asking yourself this question of, can I really start an editing or coaching business? There are a few things that I would emphasize. One is, if you're here, you're probably a strong writer. You're probably comfortable giving feedback on academic, publications. I assume if you weren't, you wouldn't be here. And so it's very likely that you already have this technical knowledge and skills that you need to do this work. If you are an academic, you have survived or are finishing up graduate school. And so that means that you are hardworking and you are tenacious, and you're someone who loves to learn. You love to research and solve puzzles. That is really what most of business and marketing involve: learning new things and solving puzzles, like how can I put my business in front of my ideal clients? And so I suspect that you may not know the answer to that question yet, but you at least have the curiosity and the intelligence and the persistence to figure it out, right? Or to work with people to figure it out. And I also suspect this is something else that I think a lot about is that you are a creative person. Maybe you feel like you have lost the ability or the time to be creative because you're so busy researching and in committee meetings and teaching and grading and all of that stuff is taking up your space. And so that is one thing that I think, running a business gives back to you is the ability to embrace those creative pursuits and those creative desires. You get to write copy for your website and your blog posts. And you get to write freely without being afraid of criticism like Reviewer 2. You get to play with artistic elements like designing your website, making YouTube videos, whatever it is that excites you. You get to stretch those creative muscles and do that stuff that can actually be a lot of fun because you have the space and the bandwidth to do it again. And aside from the creative work you do inside your business, you also have the free time to take up hobbies outside of work. You get to set your own hours. You don't work on weekends if you don't want to. You certainly don't have to work on vacations. That is probably my favorite thing is that I think I said this earlier, I do not take my laptop on vacation. And somebody in our community wrote me this week, a few days ago, and she said, she's an associate professor and she's still teaching in the same kind of situation as this other person, that she's just kind of getting the business going until she can quit her faculty job. She joined our program in January. She got hired by an editing agency, an academic press, and she's already landed her first private editing and coaching clients. And she messaged me the other day and she said, Paulina, my partner and I are going to the Virgin Islands for the weekend. And I'm paying for it with the first $1,000 I earned from editing. And I had a moment of like tearing up a little bit because I just thought, I know how much this person has struggled and worked. And she's been so unhappy with like the department politics and competition and all this stuff. And even though she's not editing full time, she's been doing enough to make money. And she's now getting to like enjoy time on vacation with her partner and have that sense of accomplishment that she's done this work, she's learned this new thing, and it's paying off for her. And that meant so much to me. So yes, you likely do have the skills, you have the ability to problem solve. And so the last question that I will pose before I stop talking here is, on this topic of marketing, which I think seems to be the key thing that is, I don't want to say an obstacle, but it's something that people are most afraid of. I think this idea of, okay, I can figure out how to send invoices and make a website and do all that stuff. But the thing that scares me the most is having to talk about my business. I think that seems to be the biggest stumbling block for people who are thinking about starting some kind of business like this. And so on that point, I will say we have spent so much time as academics defending our research and our ideas and our funding and our credentials. And so we talk about ourselves all the time, but it's from this defensive posture, right? It comes from a negative place, and it's a place where we feel like we are constantly being attacked. And we have to prove to the people who are judging us that we're worthy and that we deserve to get the job or be published or whatever it is. When you own a business, you are selling your services. Initially that sounds scary, I understand, but once you practice this skill of marketing, you come to realize that talking about yourself no longer comes from this negative defensive place. It now comes from a place of joy, of sharing your knowledge. And when you talk about your business, the point is not to like make piles of money. I mean, that's great. We all want to have piles of money, but the idea is that you're helping people, that you have this knowledge and these skills that you are using to help people. And so when you go out in the world and you tell people that you're an editor or a coach, you have a sense of pride in that. And you know that you can help other people achieve their goals, whether it's publishing or finishing their dissertation or public speaking or whatever you want to work on. And so we assume that selling is salesy and gross, but I want you, if you're challenged by this, if you're struggling with this thought of selling, I want you to reframe it as sharing your knowledge, right? As helping people, as extending your services to help other people achieve their goals. And yes, they are going to pay you for that, but you're also working, right? Like I think that's another problem with academia is we're constantly told to work and work and work, but we don't get a raise. It's like free labor is everywhere. That's not what the rest of the world is like, right? We're supposed to exchange our time and our knowledge for money. That's the way it works. That is capitalism. And unfortunately, we have a capitalist system, but that's the way it is. And so when you get your first clients and you see how grateful they are and how much you've helped them to progress toward their goals, you will feel proud. You will not feel gross. You will not feel salesy. You will feel amazing at how much you've helped them and how much they appreciate you. So yeah, okay, I will stop there. This is my program. This is the only thing I will show you on that. It is an online course with videos and templates. It comes with a 12-week group coaching cohort where we meet once a week on Zoom, and you get lifetime access to the Slack channel where everybody talks and asks questions and gets support. We also have quarterly workshops where I bring in experts and we get together. If you have questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. But let me go on to the Ask Me Anything portion. What are you struggling with? Is there anything that resonated for you in what I was talking about? Is there anything you have questions about? I'm happy to answer anything I can. Please feel free to unmute yourself or wave at me or whatever you like.
jump in. Um, I I really appreciate what you presented, and definitely a lot of that resonates with me. I am an associate professor, so I'm tenured, have job security and a salary that, sort of meets our needs, but I'm a single mom with kids about to start middle school. So that financial security piece is critically important. Having access to the benefits, that kind of thing is super important. And at the same time, I am just about to start burnout recovery after I'll be finishing a term as an associate dean in a couple of weeks. And recently had the conversation about whether to apply for full professor and learned that all of this work that I've been doing as associate dean to mentor students and respond to their crises and help them finish their graduate programs is now a liability in terms of being able to work on my own promotion. And so like I'm done. I'm so fed up. And the mentoring piece, the sort of I've been working with doctoral students primarily, and so the coaching piece, the helping them get those dissertations written and figuring out what the barriers are for them. And a lot of times it's not the writing per se, but it's things related to neurodivergence or just kind of the imposter syndrome, staring at the blank page. And so doing that kind of I love to edit. I worked previously as a copy editor. I would love to do that work, but also doing that kind of support and coaching piece is something that really appeals to me. And so, yeah, I joined the call because I really am interested in just learning more about, what are the first steps, and and that question that just came up in the chat is one of the big things that with the job market currently flooded with folks who are highly skilled, many of whom have PhDs, either as, refugees from academia or from the federal government. What does the landscape look like right now for folks with our skill set? And, I'd love it if you could be really honest about that, in terms of what you're seeing. So thank you.
Thank you for those questions. Let me, I'm hearing sort of a couple of different things in what you were saying. the first question about, being a single mom and needing the financial stability, I totally understand that. Because my mom was a single mom. But so in that situation, yes, if you were to just like suddenly quit your faculty job and start editing, it's going to take time to build up to having a solid base of private clients, right? So, and for somebody in your situation, and I was lucky that my husband had a job waiting for us in Maine, and so, we couldn't have lived on just his salary forever, but it was enough to, tide us over while I got going. I think your situation is there's quite a few people in my program who have a similar situation. It's the kind of thing where you would want to start editing or coaching on the side, build it up, and once you get to the point that you feel comfortable with it, maybe in a year, do it for a year while you're still teaching. And by at that point, you know what you're doing, you know how to market yourself, you've got a clear framework for the coaching that you want to do, you know how to talk to clients. I think that's a big part of it is learning marketing speak. We're used to like writing as academics, and marketing is obviously very different. And so you have to work on that messaging. But once you get to that point and it feels comfortable and you have a steady stream of clients, then I don't think you have to worry about not having a stable income. It does take hustle. It does take work, right? But I have never since I've been doing this, I've never worked more than 40 hours in a week, ever. And as a professor, I mean, like I said, I was working 7 days a week and God knows how many hours. So, so that's that aspect. In terms of deciding what kind of coaching you do, that is a process that we go through in the program where the two questions that I would encourage you to ask yourself and to think on, or maybe journal on if you like to do that, is who do I want to work with? Because when you're starting a business, you're starting from a blank slate, and you should be crafting the life that you want for yourself. If you like working with grad students, you can do that. If you don't like working with grad students, it's fine. You don't have to do that, right? Think about who do you want to serve? Who do you want to spend your days talking to? And then the second question is, what problem are you going to solve for them? And this is usually, sorry, I don't know if you can hear my dog. She's annoying. But this what problem can you solve for them is usually something that you have overcome yourself. So it could be publishing, it could be finishing a dissertation, it could be time management. There's somebody in our program who is trained in working with people with executive function challenges, ADHD and that kind of thing, right? Whatever it is that you love, maybe this is a struggle you've had in your own life and you've figured out how to solve that problem, and you have a framework that you can teach to other people. That's what you want to build your niche around. So those are the two questions I would say if you're thinking of coaching, and it sort of applies to editing as well. Try to answer that. Think on that, what brings you joy, and what you would want to do. Then the last part of the question about AI, editors have different opinions on this, but I will give you my take. AI is here. It is not going away, right? We have, from what I've seen, from what I've heard in conversation in the editor groups and, talking with clients and stuff, it seems that there are a lot of people in the natural sciences who are using it to write their academic papers. We've all heard of like the article that gets published and it has let me know if you want me to give you some more ideas in it, or whatever, like ChatGPT says, that they forgot to delete. There are companies called editing agencies. These are the websites where scholars go to and they upload their paper, and a freelance editor will edit that paper for the company, for the client, and then it gets sent back. That's how I got my start editing, and that's actually how I encouraged my initial cohort members to start, because you can do on-the-job training. It doesn't pay well at all, but it's a way for you to practice and get paid at the same time. What we're seeing now is a huge decline in the amount of work available from these agencies. And what I think is going on is that these people who used to take their work to the editing agencies, many of them English is not their first language, and they also don't have the budget or the connections to hire, a an individual editor. And so they would go to the agencies. Well, now they have AI, right? And they're using AI to do translations, to do basic editing. And so, but at the same time, I don't think those people were going to hire me or someone else as an editor anyway. And so my take is that the people who worked one-on-one with editors are going to continue to work one-on-one with editors because an editor and a coach, certainly a coach, gives so much more than just, fixing your typos and all and formatting and all of that. An editor is a person in your corner. They're a supporter, they're a teammate, they're somebody that you can get honest feedback from without being judged, right? If you share your paper with a department chair or a colleague, you're worried that they're going to judge you. And they probably will, because most of them are like that. Anyway, so I showed you, I've had plenty of clients. I have people still coming to my website every day, and I've been just sending them to the people in my program because I'm not really doing much editing anymore. The agencies, there's a range. Most of them, it's the ones that I encourage people to go to, they pay 1.5 cents per word US. The students in my program are making around $20 an hour at that rate. That's for the first papers that they start with, being novice editors, trying to figure out all the tools in Microsoft Word and all that stuff. When they start getting requests from private clients, I tell them they should charge at least 3 or 4 cents a word. And so just going from the agencies to the private clients, you are at least doubling what you're making on the same project, even without changing your skills, right? And it's natural that you are going to get faster and better at editing as you get practice. So that's sort of the bottom, right? The minimum. Obviously, it depends on you and how fast you are and all that. So that's my take on AI. I am not concerned about it. I don't think it's going to take coaching jobs from people. I don't know how AI is going to. I think some people are using it like for therapy now and stuff, but I can't imagine it's very good. And so I think the people who were hiring editors are going to continue hiring editors because frankly, and I wrote a blog post on this, ChatGPT is a horrible editor. Like I have spent significant time this year trying to train it to format a bibliography for me because that would be a dream come true. So if I could plug in somebody's bibliography and say, format this to APA and it did it, it can't do it. Like I have tried to train this thing to do this. It cannot do it. And so, yeah, it's just not good. Hopefully that answers your question. So somebody else has there? Oh, Kimberly.
Thanks. Thank you for your presentation. I have probably, I don't know if I have a slightly different situation or other people are in this position. I actually started a business back in 2017 with the idea that, this would be something I would do at retirement, because I'm a former English teacher. I'm actually also a former reporter. And then I went into academia and I'm hitting year 30 in education. So when I started my business, I did a lot of presentations and I would travel across the US and overseas to do presentations for school clients. And then when COVID hit, I started doing editing work because you couldn't travel anywhere. So I generally have been editing things like dissertations, book chapters, manuscripts for academics, generally within education and some a little outside education, but generally in things like sociology or psychology, just ones that kind of connect. For the last couple of years, because my job got chaotic and I'm completely on soft money, and I have been for 8 years, I have not taken on a lot of clients I take on maybe 2 or 3 that are repeat people that have something else for me, like a school strategic plan, or they're writing a grant, or they need that type of editing. But because of the situation with the Fed, um, I have one grant terminating naturally, and I was in a no cost extension year, and the Fed has basically taken away everything else I could possibly apply for. Additionally, my research area is in DEI, as well as global citizenship, human rights education, um, pretty much things that administration does not consider a priority, and they're pretty much bad things and bad words for the administration. So so my job will go down to 60% and not full time as of September 30th. So I'm trying to pivot back to taking on more clients and building the business back up. So I'm trying to think of, like, how do I do that in a way where I'm still going to have 60% of a job, but also need to pivot because, we need the income. And I'm coming down from a very decent salary and very workable salary to 60% of that with and I'm on my husband's benefits, which is good.
So so again, I hear sort of two things in this. One is the political situation, which
Yeah.
I don't deny that that is affecting research right now, right? My husband works in Alzheimer's research. We were very, well, still sort of scared that, the funding for his lab is going to get cut. Thankfully, it hasn't yet, but um I am likening that situation to COVID, where, all the restaurants during COVID and retail stores and all this were understandably terrified, and many of them went out of business. But there were also a lot that pivoted and found ways to make it through. They offered, right here in Maine, you could like buy takeout booze and stuff, or like, they offered outdoor seating and all that stuff. And they made it through. And I am hopeful that the current situation is not going to last forever. Maybe it will take another 2 or 3 years. I don't know. But I believe that we are going to restore some semblance of not dictatorship at some point, I hope. Um, so I think that people have to find a way to make it through until the science funding comes back. I don't think this is the end of science. Um,
Yeah. And I'm
that,
not in science, I'm in education. But
I'm
so
sorry,
I do
yeah,
work
in
with,
your case,
yeah,
yeah,
I do work with
DEI and
children in schools. So
right.
anyone that's not white, for lack of a better word, that was the work I was doing.
Yeah, and so I don't think it's the end of DEI. I don't think it's the end of science. I have a client that's worked with me for years, and she does DEI research, and she does a lot of research on Hispanic serving institutions and those kinds of things. And she's still continuing to publish. And she wrote me and said, "I need you to look at this very carefully," because she's worried about a potential backlash. But getting to the second half of your question, I think the key with marketing yourself, if you are trying to bring in clients, the key is letting them know that you exist, right? And maybe that sounds like, well, duh, obviously. But like, I remember as I was trying to figure this out for myself, I kept thinking, where, where do my people hang out? Where does my audience spend their time on the internet that I can reach them? Because I don't live near, I mean, the nearest university is University of Maine's like over an hour away. So it's not
Mhm.
like I can go down the street to campus. Um, and it was during COVID. But where do they spend their time? Well, I thought they spend their time on Facebook. They spend their time on Instagram, on Reddit. They spend their time reading articles, right? And so I would, if you are trying to let people know you exist, think about all the places that they frequent on the internet and put yourself there, right? So LinkedIn is huge. I go on LinkedIn and I send connection requests to people. And when they accept it, I send them a direct message and say, "Hey, thanks for connecting. What are you struggling with in academia or whatever?" Like you start the conversation and most people will ignore you, but that's fine because you're still connected to them and they're going to see your posts and they're going to start thinking about what you do and it's going to marinate. Um, I sent cold emails. right? That was hugely helpful for me. The plurality of my clients last year came from cold emails that I sent. So all you do is you go online and you find a university or departments that you want to target and you scrape their email addresses with a Google Chrome extension and you put them into either your email or there's a program called Hunter. Rudy knows all about Rudy. Is Rudy still here? Oh, Rudy, maybe Rudy left. I have a monthly membership called Digital Marketing for Academic Entrepreneurs, where we focus on marketing. And I have a video where I show you exactly how to use this tool called Hunter.io. You want to make sure that you don't use your main email address, you use a different one, like a throwaway Gmail account or something. And you cold email as many people as you possibly can with a message that tells them that you understand their pain, you understand their struggles, and you can help them solve their problems, right? So I always lead with and this applies to any marketing, whether it's your website or cold emails or social media posts. You start by agitating the problem, saying, it's summertime. All you want to do is spend time with your kids and go to the pool, but that paper is hanging over your head, right? Think about how you felt as an academic. The papers are piling up. You've got R&Rs that you've never submitted, blah, blah, blah. Agitate, agitate. I get it. I was a professor and I know exactly, or I am a professor in your case, Kimberly. I know exactly how you feel. But I'm an editor too, and I can help you. I can help take this off your plate so that I can revise your references list while you go to the pool with your kids. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. As I said, the big thing for me is, being on soft money, just there's nothing for me to pivot. And I'm also not, I'm not a tenure track or a term professor. I'm an admin faculty. So I don't have the same rules as a lot of people. So that's the other thing that's been very frustrating for me in this culture.
Yeah,
So, yeah. So, okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
you're welcome. Any other
Good.
questions?
That's good.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to really say anything, but so far, but I'm Carrie, I'm from Iowa, and I actually resonated a lot with your story. I went to UF also, and then
Okay.
kind of did a complete change. I was a postdoc and then went, instead of going into professorship, I decided at that point I didn't want to. And I have been working at one of those agencies as an editor for a long time. And the I think your analysis of how AI might affect that is really spot on. We're seeing kind of like, it seems like a drop in business, but it's all, kind of related to that really like superficial editing that AI can take care of, and not like the deep stuff that people who really want to dive into it will know. But anyway, I think my question was more related to the cold emails. Since I've not actually worked as a professor, I was just kind of wondering, like, are you targeting specifically professors, and how much money do they have to devote to services like editing? Or my work right now is more related to like research promotion. I create figures and graphical abstracts and things like that. And I still have my full-time job, but and so this would, if I did something on the side, it would maybe be kind of like a conflict of interest. So I'm trying to weigh all these things. But I kind of was just wondering like how, I don't know, successful the cold emails and things like that are in general, just in terms of like where people have money, where they can devote to that, how likely people are to respond to those emails and things along those lines.
Okay, so um you asked about money. How much money do they have? It depends who you're working with, right? I think so. Let me expand on that a little bit. Oh, somebody said, is it worth joining the EFA for clients? I've heard that it can help. I think it helps more for creative writers than academics, but it doesn't hurt to have a profile. And this goes kind of back to the question about how much do they pay per year. Um, so I made 45,000 in my first year editing. And that was just with agencies and academic presses. Um, when you go to private clients, like I said earlier, the ability to earn more goes way up, right? By multiples. When I first started taking private clients at the end of 2022, I think I started out charging 3 or 4 cents a word. And most of my clients were grad students because I put myself on ETD lists, the electronic thesis and dissertation lists. These are primarily in the US. But when you have to get your dissertation approved, it goes through the formatting office and all that. I don't think, well, it's mainly US, I think. So 3 or 4 cents a word, that's what I suggest new editors start at. Now I charge 8 cents a word. And that is because I've been doing this for 6 years and I'm good at it, frankly. And I think that there is a huge problem among editors, a lot of academic editors, where they still charge 2 or 3 cents a word. And so you go on these Facebook groups with academic editors and they're complaining about how they don't have any money and all this. Well, you should charge more, frankly. If you're good at what you do and you've been doing this a while, you should be charging more because especially if you are an academic, I don't care if you haven't been a professor, but if you're a postdoc, you've got a PhD, come on, like we're smart people, let's own that and let's own the quality of our work. And if you are a good editor, you deserve to be paid more. And a lot of my faculty clients have research funds, so I get paid through that, right? Through the check from the university, and you have to usually sign up as a vendor, but it's whatever, it's fine. You talk to the administrative assistant who handles it and they do it. But a lot of them don't, I mean, I have clients that I've edited their whole book and it was like $6,000 or something and they paid out of pocket. So I think we often assume that people don't have money, but people do have money. They're willing to spend. It's a question of what are they willing to spend it on? And you can't make that decision for them, obviously, but you need to be good at, and this comes back to the marketing language, right? Which is key here, is you have to be able to convey the benefit and the value of your work. You have to, and it's not just that I'm going to make sure there's no typos in your paper. It's what are you going to get when you work with me? You're going to get your summer back. You're going to get your vacations back. You're going to get enjoying time with your kids without having that paper hanging over your head back, right? Those are the kind of high level big pick. That's why people drop $6,000 to have an editor edit their book, right? You're going to get, maybe they don't have kids. You're going to get tenure, right? You're going to finally publish that book that's going to help you get tenure or whatever, right? You play around with this and whoever your clients are, you think through what is the emotional heartstrings pulling thing that you are doing for these people. And when you find those right points, those buttons to push, and I don't mean this in a manipulative way, right? But it is truly showing them what they can have. I mean, God, if I had an editor, I might still be in academia. Thank God I didn't. But, like it can help so much. And so many people are using editors, but yet they don't talk about it. They don't admit it. I've lost track now. Yes, so I think they do have money. Faculty certainly have money. And, when you're thinking about a journal article, even if you're charging 5, 6, 7 cents a word, that's like $500, like for a faculty member to spend $500 to get their article polished so that they can get it published faster or whatever, that's nothing, or to work on their job market letters so that they have a better chance of getting the interview. $500 is nothing to land an interview. Did I hit everything or was there,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, you did. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's been the sticking point for me trying to do something, freelance is just how to get the clients and how successful things like cold emails would be. And I
Oh, the
think you,
cold emails. I mean, yeah, it worked for me. I think
Mhm.
that's the, because what are your other options? There's social media. Well, when you make a social media post, there's like three people who see it. Even if I have like 1,000 followers on Instagram and I still get like 100 views or something on a post because that's just how it works. Instagram doesn't care that you need clients. They want to whatever, how they do their algorithm. Um, Blogging is really helpful, but it's a more of a long-term strategy. So I started blogging and posting them on my website, and then I also shared them on Medium and Reddit. Reddit is an evil place, and there are evil people there who are really mean and nasty, but I've also gotten a lot of clients from there. So if you can share a blog post, like in the PhDs or professors or academia or whatever, um, you'll get traffic and it's there forever because Google, when people Google I just had a hit on my website this morning, how to turn my dissertation into a book. I wrote a blog with that title. And I posted it on Reddit. And when people search that question on Google, Reddit pops up. So maybe my website with that blog article on it doesn't show up. It doesn't, appear in the search results, but the Reddit post does because I don't remember why it is, but for some reason Reddit shows up all the time. And then people click on that and they read your post and they go to your website and they hire you. So, but that's still kind of long term because it has to get indexed and all that stuff. So I think the cold emails help with the more it can bring you immediate clients. It depends on the season and the cycle, right? Right now in the summer is a really great time to do it because people are starting to think about, I need to hire an editor for this book I'm trying to finish or this article I want to get out. But it does come down to how you word those emails. And are you pushing, like if you just say I'm a PhD and I'm an editor, nobody cares. They care about themselves, they care about what they're struggling with and how you can help them alleviate that pain. Let me go. There were some questions in the chat. The course. Yes. Let me share the link. Um, I'll just type it in here. This is the information page. Oops. And if you have any questions or you want to set up a call or something, I'm happy to talk more about that. Do you have advice on how to get work with academic presses? That's tough. There's a podcast episode. I have a podcast called Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor, and it was with Laura Poole, Poole. She goes super in depth because she only works with presses. When I was trying to get those jobs, I would just cold email them as well. I'd send you look for the managing editor or production editor or something like that, somebody with that title. And you just email them and send your resume and tell them in the email, one or two sentences, include the style guides that you work in, like APA or Chicago or whatever. And it's just honestly, it's a crapshoot if they need somebody or not. I'm not a big fan of working for academic presses unless you're trying to just get practice in the beginning because they also don't pay well. Unless you're working for like Oxford or Cambridge or one of those big time ones, they don't pay well. And to get a job with them, you have to like have the Chicago Manual of Style memorized, and um, it's that's not my kind of editing. I don't really like doing that kind of stuff, but yeah. I worked for Edward Elgar for a long time. They were really nice, but they paid like just under 1 cent per word. And I was consistently making like $40 an hour. And I ended up leaving because I could make $100 an hour or more, with my own clients. So, um, wish I had a developmental editor. Yeah. It's a shame that most people don't even know they exist. I didn't know they existed. Carrie asks, can you elaborate on chairs requiring editors for students?
I can actually on that one. If a chair, it's been my experience at two different institutions that if a chair is consistently asking the student to correct their writing or they're not taking feedback well, this happens with a lot of second language learners or third language learners. Um, they will often require an editor for the dissertation. And a lot of students, there are opportunities at both institutions I've worked at to receive funding and apply for funding specifically for that editing.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it may not be at all institutions, but I've worked at two different institutions where that funding was available. So it may not cover it all, but yeah, it's if they don't think that, and throughout the program, there is a very strict idea of grasping APA, particularly, and I'm working in an education program. And if that's not that message is not getting across or it's just not really possible, there is that opportunity. But we do often push, to go to the writing center and provide resources all throughout the program.
Yeah, and if you can get on some of those electronic thesis and dissertation lists, that's a big help too, because you just email the formatting office like thesis at whoever.edu or whatever it is, and if you can get on the list, you're there forever. The students come through and look at the list of editors and contact you if they like the looks of your work or your website. It helps to start with schools that you're affiliated with. So like if you went to UF, you contact them and say you're an alum. That's also a good strategy for cold emailing is say, I got my PhD at UF and blah, blah, blah with your cold email. Because I think it's anything you can do to hook somebody early on so they don't hit delete can help. I will also put this is the link to if you're already editing, my Becoming an Academic Editor program is more than you need. I have a monthly membership where we talk about marketing. And I have a library of videos and we have a Slack channel. We do monthly chats. What do you mean, Miranda, repeat the thesis lists for editors? It's if you Google electronic thesis and dissertation, ETD, that will you can even do like electronic thesis and dissertation editor list. If you Google that, a lot of universities will pop up, and you just find the email address for that. Thank you for being here, Jennifer. Any other questions or worries or anything I can alleviate? You're welcome. Anything
I
else?
have
Yeah.
maybe more of a starter question. I'm a postdoc now, and I've worked in writing centers for years, and teach writing is what I mainly teach. Um, what do you think about the transition between um, editing sort of as a teacher and the way I've been trained to work with people in writing centers is I think like more teaching and leading and asking questions than just sitting down and editing something for someone. And are there different ways that can look on the sort of continuum between coaching and editing? And are there things you did or that you would recommend someone to do to like be more in an editing mindset than a sort of teaching writing mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if so it depends, I mean, which direction you go depends on what you want to do, right? I have a lot of people in my program who are self-identified introverts who like would be happy to edit and never talk to anyone ever again. I think I felt that way a lot when I left academia. So, if you are strictly doing editing, and here we have sort of two branches. You have copy editing, which is your red pen, cleaning up typos, punctuation, grammar, revising for clarity and flow lightly. And then you have developmental editing, which is more the big picture. Usually this is like a book or a dissertation. is the argument clear? Does each chapter have a clear thesis? Blah, blah, blah. With copy editing, which is what I mainly do, there is a tendency, especially I think among new academic editors, to like rewrite the whole thing. And so that's my first suggestion. If you are starting out copy editing, and if you worked in a writing center, I assume you are a good writer and you know how to copy edit. You correct the errors, the typos, the punctuation, the grammar. And then you very lightly revise for clarity. Like if you read a sentence and you go, I have no idea what they're saying, or you read a sentence and you're like, oh, there's a better way to say that. You revise in that sense. But you really want to be as light as possible and preserve the author's voice. And so I assume the difference between that and a writing center is a writing center, you're more teaching people what to change and they change it themselves. Whereas with copy editing, you're just, you're changing it for them. But if you like coaching, you can describe yourself as an editor and writing coach. And you can say, do exactly what you're doing for the writing center, but on your own. And say you want to bring in grad students, right? There's people who work as dissertation coaches, and there's so many grad students out there who are not getting the support they need from their PIs or their advisors. And you're essentially filling that gap. Or maybe there's students who just need more support than what their advisors can give. And so you're meeting with them weekly or monthly or whatever it is to help them stay on track, to stay accountable. Maybe that includes you reading drafts of the paper or the chapters and giving feedback. It totally depends on what you want to do and what your clients need from you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. That's helpful because I think I would, as just a copy editor, want to like ask for clarification or go back and forth and talk to somebody, and I might be more in the realm of coach. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you can do both, right? Especially as you're starting out, you could take on copy editing projects and you just have to sort of learn to make those executive decisions on and if you're not sure, you just leave a comment, and like what correct spelling and punctuation looks like, but if you're not sure what they mean, you just leave a comment and say, is this what you mean? And you try rephrasing it or something. And you don't have that sort of back and forth with the client. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of people out there who want to coach as well. Any other questions?
I don't know if it's kind of a fully formed question because my head is now just absolutely swimming. Because this was kind of my first foray into thinking about things. And completely different situation, but still so much of what you said and what everyone said has resonated completely. So I'm from England, but I moved to Missouri last year to marry my husband, and I'm finishing up my PhD remotely from my British university. And then I will be like entering the world of academia over here. So I'm kind of navigating a completely new and different approach to things. I had a very laid out 5-year plan, which completely went out the window. So I'm just kind of looking at options, and I guess I want to future-proof myself because I don't want to end up in the burnout zone. And I'm also dealing with a recent ADHD diagnosis. So I'm kind of just trying to look at everything and balance everything and see what my options are rather than throwing myself into something that, so many other people are telling me to run away from. Whilst I absolutely love the research and the writing of academia, I'm sort of wondering, is that the right direction for me? So I'm investigating things like this and other options. So yeah, like I said, I don't think it's kind of a fully formed question because it's just wow, okay, that's a lot. But kind of, yeah, how do you recommend I kind of what's my next step of for exploring and investigating, what would you recommend as next tentative steps?
Do you mean for like starting an editing or coaching business? What is your next step?
Yeah.
Or is
Or
it
for, yeah, and
figuring out
for,
whether or not you want to go?
yeah, basically, yeah. I think it sounds like something I've done editing, copywriting before, and really love that kind of thing. And then I've done like accountability things that I guess is actually coaching without realizing it for fellow students, where I've said like, do you want me to send you an email on a Monday saying, hey, let's set some goals, and then check in at the end of the week and things like that. So I've kind of done that kind of thing without considering it as being something that I can actually monetize and commercialize. So yeah, I'm just kind of looking at all options on the table and wondering where to explore next.
Yeah, so I would start with those two questions that I mentioned earlier. The who do you want to work with and what problem can you help them solve? And I think that's where you're thinking, you can work through those questions of what might my business look like? What
Mhm.
might my niche be? Um, and as you think on it more over days or weeks or whatever, I think you'll get clarity on that. You could look up dissertation coach, time management coach, find other people online, listen to my podcast. There's a lot of interviews with other editors and coaches, and you can get a sense of what that looks like. But and you said people are trying to tell you not to go into academia, and I don't want anybody to tell you what, you should or shouldn't do. There are many people who are perfectly happy in academia. So, like, I think it's for you to figure out what do you want your daily life to look like, And if you go into an academic job and you are aware of how easy it is to burn out and you put tools in place and systems in place to prevent that, you can be perfectly happy, right? But it just I think a lot about that too, of like, what is it about those of us who get miserable, who burn out and versus those who don't? Like, there's something about us. And I think it's that we give too much, that we're giving, giving, giving constantly, and we're not getting anything back. And there's other people who just don't give nearly as much. And so they're fine. But, you just have to figure out how do I want to spend my days? Because like nothing else matters, the prestige, the professor title, who cares? If you're miserable, who cares? So it's like, do you want to work from home? Do you want to learn how to do marketing? Or do you want to have an office on a campus where you're interacting with students? And I don't, it's you have to figure that out. But I think definitely the next steps are thinking through if you were to start a business, who do you want to work with and what kind of work do you want to be doing?
Yeah.
And we work through that in my program. We start by I talk about editing agencies and publishers, and I help people make a one-page resume. Although, because of the issues I mentioned earlier, that's shifting a bit. I have a course. I'm working with another editor on developing a course that trains you in professional copy editing because I think the editing agencies are becoming less and less of an option. We've had a lot of people in the cohorts who have been hired, and they are working, they're getting paid for it. But I'm not sure how that's going to go in the future. So if I can train up people in my program, get them the practice they need with practice editing exercises and stuff, I think they will feel confident enough to go out and start marketing themselves to private clients. They can skip the whole agency stage. But we work through that. We talk through these exercises of what do you want your business to look like? What do you want your niche to be? And you sort of write it up on your draft homepage. And I think that process of writing it and thinking about it and all that you get clarity on the direction you want to go. Hopefully that
That's
helps.
great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I said, it's just the overwhelm right now and lots to think through and work through.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Thank
And you don't have to decide, right? You don't have to decide that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, right? I think that was a thing I struggled with when I was considering leaving is, well, what am I going to do instead? Well, you don't have to know, like you can know, like if you financially have to stay in your academic job until you get your next job, just get your next job. That doesn't mean your next job doesn't mean you're going to do it for the rest of your life, right? It is your next job. And then maybe you'll have another next job and you'll figure it out. Or maybe you start the business on the side while you're still teaching or whatever you're doing right now, and you build it up like the other people I mentioned who are in the program. I think it's just really helpful to be aware that this alternative is out there, right? That, like you said, Charlotte, you were doing all this stuff and not getting paid for it. Now you've realized you could get paid for it. Like, you absolutely can. I mean, the coaching industry is like $4 billion or something like that. And so, yeah, I think you just have to develop a framework that you can teach to people, and then you have to do the marketing of explaining to them how this is going to transform their life. Any other questions or anything? Okay. Thank you so much for being here. This was really fun. If you do want the 3 steps to become an academic editor or coach, just reply to my email. I'm happy to send it out. You will get an email in a few hours with the replay from today. Maybe I'll throw a link in there to the other video. And you'll get some emails about the program and all that. So thank you for being here. I'm always happy to answer any questions. Just, email me or find me on social or whatever. And other than that, oh, good. Thank you for watching. I've got to get better at editing my YouTube videos because they're kind of basic, but the information is good, even if the visuals aren't that great. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good weekend. Bye.